Hi, this is Eric Elder. I help out with the online ministry at Eastview Christian Church in Normal, Illinois. I'd like to talk to you today about getting comfortable with the numbers. I'm going to give you 10 views for counting online views. I've been doing online ministry for 25 years, and there's always an interesting perspective of looking at the online numbers. Sometimes they're so incredible that it's hard to believe that these numbers are actually people watching what you're putting out as content. We reached an important milestone at our church on Easter Sunday this year, April 12th of 2020, and we reached over 25,000 online viewers, 25,066 to be exact. And here's just our celebratory graphic of that. And behind this graphic, we've tracked where these different views came from. Some came from our website, some came from Facebook, some came from YouTube, some came from a multiplier that we use, and I'm going to go through each of those things with you tonight. But I want to start with this first view of online views, and that's the biblical view. First of all, is it even biblical to count numbers? I mean, should we even be counting? Is that something that glorifies God? Well, there's actually a whole book of numbers in the Bible, so it's certainly a biblical thing to do, to count numbers. And there are a number of times when God does ask us to count, and when we did count in the Bible historically. So in Acts, of course, there were 3,000 were added in one day. Someone must have counted those. In Moses' time, he counted the tens and the hundreds and the thousands for organizational purposes. It helped him to organize and to lead the people through the desert. Gideon, of course, counted 32,000 fighting men. God said that was too many, send some home. He counted 10,000, that was still too many. He got down to 300 fighting men, and God said, that's enough, because I want to show you that I'm the Lord, and I'm going to do this with only 300 men. And so Gideon counted numbers. Of course, there was David. He counted numbers, the number of fighting men, but his motivation was a little different, and God took him to task for that and caused a plague to come. 70,000 people died, even after he had counted 800,000 fighting men from Israel, 500,000 fighting men from Judah, and then 70,000 died. So even in the midst of saying you shouldn't have counted those numbers, they still counted numbers to talk about how many died through the plague before it finally stopped when David repented. So there's certainly plenty of precedent for counting numbers. Our motivation is one thing that matters. Why do you want to count the numbers? Well, I'll get to that in a moment. There's also one more passage in the New Testament that talks about numbers. And the Lord said to John one day, come forth and you will receive eternal life. But John came in fifth and was given a toaster. Okay, that's not in the Bible, but it is a good story about numbers. Number two, numbers are incredible. These online numbers, sometimes they're hard to believe because they're so overwhelming. There's so many people watching online. And if you're used to counting people in person, this can be a little disconcerting because you say, wow, are there really that many people watching? For instance, we had about 5,000 people coming to our physical campuses. We have two campuses in Normal and Bloomington, Illinois. And 5,000 people were coming in person. About 2,000 people were coming on the online at that time. And this was prior to the virus when we had the shelter-in-place order. And then everyone had to watch online. Well, that was about 7,000 total watching. But the next week, after we all had to watch online, all of a sudden our numbers were at 12,000, then 15,000, then 17,000. Then Easter Sunday was 25,000 people watching. And you have to wonder, how can you have more people watching online than are even coming in person? Well, there's 5 reasons I just want to give you of why that happens to be online, not just on our Easter Sunday, but just in general. Number one, it's just easy to share an online service. When you try to invite someone to come to the church with you, that could take several invitations. They may never come with you. But to share online, it's just so easy to share. We had 433 shares on Facebook alone on Easter Sunday. That's 433 people click the share button, shared it on their homepage, which then goes out to all their friends. That could be 100 to 1,000 to more friends per share, per 433 shares. And that leads to the second reason. It's just convenient to come online. Not everyone comes to our churches every week. People come on average 1, maybe 2 times a month on average to a physical church. This is according to statistics lately. And so they'll come 1 or 2 times per month. But online, there's no excuses. They don't have childcare issues. They don't have, if they're sick, they can still watch. If they're out of town, they can still watch. If they're wintering in Florida, they can still watch. And so online is just much more convenient. And so a lot more people are able to watch and watching online. Number 3, we actually ran ads on social media and on television in a 10-county market around our city. during the weeks that were leading up to Easter. It wasn't just for Easter Sunday, but we had an ad campaign planned already to try to share with people to watch online. And on Sunday mornings, as they're watching the morning news shows, they can just click and it says, hey, if you want to join our church online this morning, we're streaming right now live. Just click this link and you can come watch our service. And between those ads and the ads on Facebook and YouTube, we were able to increase our number of views as well. Number 4, people can come and watch from anywhere in the world. Here's just a chart I'll show you from the 4 weeks leading up to Easter. First, I'm just going to show this is in the United States alone. These are the 4 weeks leading up to Easter, and these are per zip code. There's a red dot for every zip code that was watching. So that means even in our Bloomington Normal area, I'm going to zoom in here. The number of people watching in Illinois alone is astounding. And if I'll zoom in here, there's only one red dot for Bloomington, one red dot for Normal, one red dot for each zip code. Let's scroll up here to Chicago. Look at this, the number of people watching from Chicago. This is 2 hours away. We would typically say that's too far for people to drive. They're not going to drive 2 hours to come to our church. But online, look at how many zip codes we're watching. This isn't just individuals watching, this is zip codes watching. If we back up a little bit, go down to Florida, and this is in April. So these are March and April stats. If we zoom down here to Florida, you'll see it's fairly covered with people watching from a number of zip codes. Orlando, Tampa, Miami, all throughout the country, people are watching. And not only all throughout the country, we also made a chart here of the stats of people watching throughout the world in those 4 weeks. And there's a flag in every country. That's not one person per country, that's one flag per country where people are watching. And those were viewers from 28 countries were watching just in the 4 weeks leading up to Easter. This doesn't even count Easter Sunday. So there's a great global reach. There's this worldwide reach that we can reach so many people, and that's part of why our numbers are so high as well. So if you if you look at online numbers, you can sometimes just add a 0 or 2 zeros, and that would increase your attendance just because, not because you would artificially add that, but because you can reach so many more people. In fact, if you ever did meet the guy who invented the number 0, any idea what you'd say to him? I don't know about you, but I'd say, thanks for nothing. Look, there's also a personal view of numbers. Numbers matter because people matter. It's a person per number. There's a story behind each number. There's a reason why that person is connecting with your particular church or ministry online. And every person matters. They matter to God and they matter to you because you care about people. God cares about people. God so loved the world that he gave his only son. He wants everyone to come to him, and he can use it online. It's a very personal thing. It's not just to get lots of numbers. We actually identify the people that are watching. We reach out to them. We try to interact with them. We have 3 different chat rooms going on Sunday mornings, one on Facebook, one on YouTube, and one on our website. And we have thousands of people. Just in the last few weeks, we've had thousands of people each Sunday in those chat rooms between 2 services. And we have several volunteers. We have about 15 volunteers. We've now bumped that up to 25 volunteers who help out in those chat rooms, 2 to 4 people per service that will chat and interact. And we greet every person by name who is in the chat room. If they're on Facebook and they say hello to us and they're watching from Tallahassee, Florida, we say hi to Ann in Tallahassee. Our pastor will give a shout out to 5 people every Sunday from stage, and he will say, welcome to Ann in Tallahassee, Florida. It's a very personal connection because we care about the people that are watching online, just like we care about people who are in person. In fact, there was a woman watching from Hannibal, Missouri, and our pastor gave her a shout out and said hello to this person, this woman by her name from Hannibal, Missouri. And she said in the chat room, oh, I'm so excited. He said my name. Couldn't believe that he would say her name, the pastor on stage. She came back the next week. She asked for a personal prayer in the chat room. There's a place where we can pray privately with people. We prayed one-on-one with her. And the 3rd week she came back, she said, this is my 3rd week coming back, and I think I found my new home church. We have people from several other states who have become members of our church, even though they're watching fully online. And that is important to us because they're important to us. God cares about these people. And sometimes there's not a local church that has the same characteristics that our church has. Sometimes they're just looking for a connection with someone that they connect with, and they've connected with us for various reasons. Whether they know someone on staff, they know someone who attends the church, whether it's a son or a daughter, some other connection, and we're glad to have them. We'd rather they connect with the church than connect with no church. We want people to gather and grow and give and go, and whether they're online or in person, we're just happy to have them come along. Numbers matter because people matter. We don't want to leave anyone out. You know the number 13? Not on my watch. Let's look at number 4. This is a philosophical view. What you count counts. I've heard this before in terms of traditionally counting at a church. If you count heads, that's what counts to you. If you count dollars, that's what counts to you. If you count views, that's what counts to you. So what do you count? That's the question. What you count counts, and there are lots of things you could count online. I want to show you some numbers that we count for our different ways that people can watch. And these are things that count to us. They're things that matter to us because people matter to us. This first statistic I'm going to show you is from a platform called High Vision. I'm going to pull up our stats from Easter Sunday. Let's go back to April 12th, starting at 8 a.m. until midnight that night. This is how we typically count because we do some test views earlier in the morning. I'm going to apply that. Then I'm going to filter it because we have a lot of things on our website that people can watch. I want to only count the time that we were streaming. So I'm going to go by title, do our live stream, and then our service after it was streamed because people could watch it later in the day. And it shows here that we had 5,107 people watching that service for that Sunday. We count that number, and then we also count the midweek viewers. So during the week, I'll add that to our date range. We're going to go from Sunday, April 12th at 8 a.m. until midnight on Saturday night, the 18th, and apply that. And you'll see we're at 5,167 views. We've added 60 more views between Monday through Saturday. And we like to count all of those views because people time shift. They don't always come at Sunday morning at 9. They don't always come at 11. We've had 5 o'clock services. Some people choose that. Well, now they can have a service anytime they want. They can attend service. It doesn't matter to us if they watch at midnight or if they watch at 5 o'clock Monday morning. We want to count those as people who we have impacted for the gospel. And so those people are counted for a 7-day trend. Then we start the count over again the following week. Now, there's all kinds of ways to count. You know, how long did people watch? Did they watch for just a short time or a long time? I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. On this particular Sunday, the average viewing length was 36 minutes and 59 seconds. So out of those 5,000 and some people, on average, they watched 36 minutes, 37 minutes, 1 second short of that. And so 37 minutes they watched out of a just under 60-minute service. And so that's a good percentage of the service, well over half. And so we're happy that we had an average watching of that many people. Now you could say, well, we're only going to count people who watch for more than 5 minutes. You could say you want to watch people that watch only the entire service. That's what we're going to count. But we don't even count that way in church. We count somewhere at a midpoint because people are still trickling in as the service gets started. Some people trickle out before the service is over, but somewhere in the midpoint we count. And so that's what we count. And so if we have people watching for 37 minutes, typically our service is an hour and 15 minutes prior to everyone doing the shelter in place. And we're moving back towards that now, but our average watch time has been 40 to 45 minutes. So typically 43, 44 minutes is an average watch time for people. So some are watching all the way to the end, some are checking out just a little earlier, but typically watching about 45 minutes, which is amazing that people would watch online and watch a service for that long. So that's a philosophical view of just, you have to decide how long you're going to count, how much you're going to count, what counts to you. Well, this is what counts to us. Numbers, they seem like they're pretty static, but it's difficult sometimes to count them. What would you call a number that can't keep still? I'd call it a Roman numeral. Roman, R-O-A-M-I-N, a Roman numeral. All right, number 5, educational. I want to show you an educational view of some of these numbers too. Let's take a look at Facebook here for a minute. And we're going to jump in here to Facebook and look at the service live as it played on Sunday morning on Easter. So we'll go to April 12th service. We're in the behind the scenes of Facebook. I'm going to click on this service. It says it streamed for 1 hour and 23 minutes, although part of that time was a 15-minute countdown, part was afterwards as well. But we can see here that there was a peak live viewers of 893. So if we open that up, you'll be able to see, here's the viewers during the broadcast, and at the left it's showing what was going on. Here's the 15-minute countdown, and of course we didn't have as many viewers. It was going up 200, 300, 500, but as soon as the service started and the first worship song hit, we were at about 600 viewers were watching at that time. First few songs of worship, we can scroll through here, and we got to a peak viewing right near here. This was near peak 887, and these people stayed throughout the entire sermon. There's actually a peak view of 893 right here, and that's the number that's recorded at the top, and they stayed through the end of the sermon, and during the last worship song they started to trail off, and during the closing screen that says we're glad you're here, many people trailed off, and that was the end. So we can actually see after the fact how many people were watching. This is very educational, and in fact, when we switched to online, this might be interesting to you, we used to have various announcements, offerings, sometimes communion. We would switch it up after the sermon was over, but we always notice at the end of the sermon, people will drop off, 20%, 30%, sometimes 40% will drop off at the end of the sermon. So anything that takes place after that, maybe an interview with a missionary, for instance, people miss that. And so we have restructured for our online viewers specifically to put any important elements before the end of the sermon. And sometimes we'll have a closing song or a closing goodbye. But typically we include the most important elements up front now because of this issue. In fact, we had a special video on Easter Sunday where we did a collage of many people singing in their homes from their phones. We thought this was going to be a very great element in the service, and one person threw out the idea we should put it right at the beginning of the service. It would start with a bang. Someone said we should end the whole service with this, hit it at the end. Another person suggested we put it with communion and during communion. And by looking at these online stats, we were able to say, well, if you want the peak number of people to see that worship song, and you think that's going to be that special, let's put it right before the sermon starts. So that's what we did after communion, after the worship. We added that video in, and then the pastor got up to preach. And it turned out to be great because that's exactly what we had. We had 824 people, or near peak, were watching at that time. So it's very educational to look at the numbers behind the numbers, and it can help you just in determining what's going to go on with your audience. There are other kinds of things in here where you can learn more about your audience. Audience engagement, our top audience. It turns out 69% women on Facebook and 22% men were watching on Facebook. Interestingly, the numbers switch on YouTube. On YouTube, we have over 50% of the men are watching and under 50% are women on YouTube. This might inform how you do some advertising. Maybe for Mother's Day, you would focus more on Facebook. For Father's Day, you might focus more on YouTube. So these statistics can be very educational, but I'll show you down here too some other interesting statistics. This says that we had a number of 3-second views was 18,000. Now we don't count that 18,000 because a 3-second view doesn't count much to us. Estimated reach here is 34,000. Facebook estimates we reached 34,000 people. People at least scrolled through it. They saw it even in a flash, 34,000 people. Well, we don't count that number because that number is not as meaningful to us. What we count is this peak live viewers, 893. And so we're undercounting the number of people that we actually reached, but we're getting an accurate count for us that we feel good. That's the same as if we were walking into our church auditorium and count the number of heads somewhere midway through the service. You're just getting a slice. It's not the same as the number would be at the beginning of the service or at the end of the service, but these are people that we can count a peak simultaneous number. Each platform is different, and I'll share that with you. But I thought you might find this interesting. One more interesting thing while we're here on Facebook, audience engagement. If you look at the post engagement, the people that reacted here, here's where it says we had 433 shares. This shows the number of hearts that were posted on that post. And if we look at the video for that, it shows how many reactions, how many comments, how many shares during the service. At what point in the service? Let me click the hearts. People can click a heart when they like something that's going on in the service. And it's interesting to see that there are some hearts right here at the beginning. What was going on in the service at that time? We can scroll back and see on the video and push play. Here's the middle of a worship song. That got some peak views, peak hearts. During this great video, the collage, we had these wonderful hearts. Many people just hearted. And as we get to the end of the service, another worship song got a lot of hearts. And again, at the end of the very end of the service, people gave us lots and lots of hearts. So it's interesting to know what gets a response from people, how they react, when they share, what they do. I'm going to close this out. So it's very educational looking at these different statistics behind the scenes. And I heard that a Roman walked into a bar one time, held up 2 fingers, and the bartender gave him 5 drinks. Why was that? Well, because he was a Roman. Roman numerals, get it. All right, let's move on. Number 6. Number 6 is the traditional view. You know, you might say, oh, this is so complex, all this counting numbers online, but really it's complex in person too. When you have a certain size of a church, it's not hard to count the number of people in the sanctuary, the number of people in the Sunday school classrooms, the number of kids, the number of volunteers. But as you get to a certain bigger size of church and the numbers grow, it just gets more and more complicated. For instance, at our church, we have a mega church now of several thousand people every Sunday morning, and we have 2 services. So we have some people volunteer at one service and then they attend the other service. Some people are working backstage for both services. Some people are working on stage. Some people are teaching classes. There are people out in the parking lot parking cars. Do we count all the people that are in the building, all the people that are on the campus? Do we count all the people that were at each service? There are people in the atrium that buy some food at the cafe and watch on the TVs in the atrium. Maybe they've got kids with them and it's sort of like a cry room to them. They can just sit in the atrium, watch. We even bring communion to the people in the atrium. But do we count the people in the atrium or do we not count the people in the atrium and in our attendance figures for on campus? Do we count the people in the parking lot, their parking cars, or not count them? Do we count people that are only in the worship center? Do we count all the high school and the junior high? And what if they serve earlier in the morning or later? What if they go to church with their parents? You can see how it quickly gets complicated, and there are a lot of decisions are made about numbers and what's your philosophy, and what you count counts. So I just want to say, you might say, this is so complicated. It's actually not. We have a lot of data for online. In fact, we have more data. You can't get the hearts engagement kind of data in person that you can online. Maybe if you're in a church where you get a lot of amens or hallelujahs, you'll get that feedback. But we have a lot of data online. And the question is just, what do you want to count? What's consistent that you can consistently count, and what is trending? So you can watch trends and make sure you're meeting people's needs, make sure you're engaging with people, make sure you're getting the message that you want to the right people. So I just looked at even just in our country, we are having a census this year, and hopefully it's a good census. I think it's a good reason, because you want to be able to decide how many votes you get from different places and how much money gets apportioned to certain parts of the country, et cetera. So there are some good things to come out of this census. I think the motivation is reasonable. But look at this. Back in 1810, it cost $100,000. That's when we crossed the threshold of $100,000. In 1850, we crossed the 1 million mark. 1850, it was 1.4 million it cost to run a census. Well, as the country's grown, we reached 1 billion in 1980, and then 10 years ago, it cost $13 billion just to count the number of people in the country. You would think, how hard can it be? Just have everybody raise their hand, and there it is. But the bigger you get, the more complex it gets to count. So you might say this is just frustrating online numbers, but it just comes with the territory when you have many, many numbers. You know, it also just depends on how you phrase it or how you view it. You know, I was given $1,000. I won this $1,000 prize. I decided to give a quarter of it away, and so I still had $999.75 left. Okay, didn't really win $1,000 and give a quarter of it away, but you can see how you would say a quarter or a quarter, and it just depends on how you define the term. Number 7, the perpetual view of numbers. I want to take you to YouTube for a minute because our numbers, we count a 7-day record, and I always say that the numbers that we're counting are conservative numbers. I try to estimate a conservative number because they're already so astounding. There's no reason to inflate them. It's just astounding the number of people you can reach online, and people don't believe you even when you give a conservative number. So this can help, but there's a perpetual nature of these numbers that I say we're undercounting on many fronts. Like I just showed you on Facebook, we only count the peak simultaneous views, not everyone who scrolled by or everyone who's even watched 20 minutes. If they weren't there when we counted, they didn't get counted. So let me share the screen again with you, and I'll show you some of our YouTube numbers. Because these videos last a very long time. Here's our video from Easter Sunday service. I'm going to click on the analytics here, and we'll see that Easter Sunday service, I'm going to change it back to the Easter dates. On Easter Sunday, April 12th through the 18th, for that week, we had 3.6 thousand. Specifically, we had 3,565 viewers watched that video. And we can go and see the average length of time that people watched was 25 minutes and 42 seconds, or about 40% of the service that they watched, which is similar in a way to what we were seeing on the other. In fact, for YouTube, this is quite a high number, 25 minutes on YouTube. They're watching cat videos that are a minute long or things that scroll by very quickly. So for them to stick around for 25 minutes or 40% of the service was incredible. But look, since that time, since that 7-day count, if I say how many have watched since published, it was for that week 3,565. But now we're going to go to since uploaded, and that's now 3,724. So there've been another couple hundred people have been added to that count. And so we don't count those. So we're actually undercounting the number of people who have watched this video just by limiting it 7 days. So sometimes people say, well, they didn't watch as long on YouTube, so maybe we shouldn't count that many. But I say in the long run, we're actually going to get more views. In fact, let me take you to another video. This was a video from about 2.5 years ago. Our pastor preached a message on sex. And if you'll see that video back at the week that it aired in August of 2017, August 27th, 2017. I actually happen to remember because I was on stage that week and giving a short testimony as well, just how God had worked in my life and given me just some great victories in this area. So we'll go from August 27th to September, which was the week later, 2nd, 2017. Apply that. So for that Sunday, we recorded 2,854 people watched that service. But since then, that same talk, if you say since uploaded over the last 2.5 years, it's been watched 7,612 times. That's over double the amount of times that we counted. So we only counted 2,800 and some, but really it's been viewed 7,600 and some times. So there's this perpetual nature to once you post something online that it just grows exponentially. And so you might think, well, we're overcounting, but really we're undercounting how God is going to use this and how many lives he can touch in the long run. You know, speaking of 7,000 people watching, it makes me think, you know, how to make a 7 an even number. Take away the S, and it becomes an even number. Okay. Great, number 8, practical view, and we've got 8, 9, and 10 to go here. There's a practical view too. There's actually more than one person watching on many devices. In fact, we have done surveys throughout the years, and we just ask a one-question survey. How many people are watching, including you? People can type an answer. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3 people. We just click submit, and it sends us that data. Well, we've collected that data now for several years, and before everyone stayed at home during the shelter in place, our average number of people watching per device was 1.8. So we did thousands of surveys for the first 1.5 years, And there's an industry standard number, 1.8, that many people in streaming services use, not just churches, that they'll say there's typically 1.8 people watching per device. Well, we ran the numbers ourselves just because we wanted to be comfortable with that, and that's what we came out with, 1.8 and a little bit. So it was just over 1.8. So we've used 1.8 as a multiplier, we call it, over all these years. But we also know, we know just from people being in the chat room, we know from people sending in pictures anecdotally that people are watching with their families. We'll be able to see them watching with their pets and their dogs, which they don't include, although sometimes they'll say, and my dog is watching with me too. But we ask how many people are watching, including you. But typically that 1.8 number holds. And so that's just a standard multiplier. And when I first started doing this for the church, I just wanted to make sure that that was true. And so I ran all those numbers myself just to verify, and it was actually very true. Now, of course, counting from 1 to 10 seems like an easy thing, but if Bill Gates were to teach your kindergartners how to count, here's how he would do it. 1, 2, 3, 3.1, 95, 98, ME, XP, Vista, 7, 8, 10. And of course, we're at Windows 10 now. So counting isn't as simple as you think, even for computer people. Number 9, there's a theoretical view. With this multiplier, we had to theorize. One of our executive pastors said, as we go to the shelter in place, do you think that 1.8 multiplier would still hold, or do you think it might be something different? Well, we decided to go ahead and run those surveys again, even though we'd gathered plenty of data, and so we've just established that number. But we had this theory that, yes, probably more people were going to be watching. Was that theory true? Well, it bore out in practice. We ran the surveys. This is the results of 6 weeks of surveys. And it turned out there were more people that watched. On the first Sunday, there were 2.73 out of 139 responses. Here's all the responses: 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 8. And sometimes they'll tell us 8 and they'll say their family name. And we know that family actually has 8 people and they are watching. These aren't bogus numbers. These are just we just asked them, how many are watching with you? The next week, 2.331, 2.24. Easter Sunday, we had a 2.39 average out of 223. That was the most survey responses that we'd received. There on Easter Sunday, it was 2.39. We took another survey the next week, 2.34. So our weekly average for the 6 weeks that we've been online was 2.333. And that was an average response of about 173, 175 responses per week. So that gave us a good number, a good feel that these are good, healthy numbers. So our new multiplier is 2.3. And so we're using that for a while because we're going to say this is shelter in place is going to keep us at these levels probably. Maybe when we go back to a mix, so some people online, some people in person, we will run these numbers again, come up with a multiplier that makes sense at that point. But that's where sometimes theory and then testing out your theory can make sense. In fact, all these numbers, odd numbers, 2.33 makes me think of, when I got in a fight with some numbers, the numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. The odds were against me. Number 10, there's a supernatural view. God has a supernatural way, and this is my final point, that God brings people in a supernatural way. When I started helping out the church and I spoke to the elders about what could be possible, and through my own ministry, I had grown a subscriber list to many, many thousands of people. And I told them, I think getting to a high goal is going to be doable. It's just how are you going to take care of those people, because you will get to that goal. And at the time that I started helping them, they were about 1,000 people were watching online, which was a smaller percentage than their 4,000 or 5,000 people that were coming in person. But we started increasing that, and the goal that they had stated a year prior to me helping them was to reach 25,000 people online. That seemed rather incredible, a little incredulous, that they would set such a big, hairy, audacious goal of 25,000 people watching online. But when our pastor said that from the stage on that day, and this is from my journal back in November 27th, 2017, I wrote after church that Sunday, "Father, thank you for the wonderful worship at church yesterday. So heartfelt, and the thought that I would be willing to apply for a job at Eastview that doesn't yet exist and they don't know they need, called Pastor of Online Communications, to host the service online before and after for online guests. Something when our pastor spoke that number and said they want to reach 25,000 people, I was reaching that many people through my own ministry, and I just thought, I can help them get there. That's something that I think God would want me to do. And there's lots of things that I've helped out with it at the church, but this was something that I was gifted at and passionate about because I want to reach people anywhere in the globe that we can reach them. And so I didn't tell anyone that, though, because there didn't exist a job. They didn't have an online ministry that was the way that it eventually became. They were just streaming their services and letting people watch. Well, a few months later, they formed an online team to help chat with people in the chat rooms. I decided to volunteer for that. I still didn't tell anyone except one of my daughters about this thing that God had spoken to me, and the surprise that I would actually apply for a job that didn't exist and they didn't know they needed. A year later, they actually created a job, a position, a part-time position called the Pastor of Online Campus, close to Pastor of Online Communications, very close, Pastor of Online Campus, to help host the service before and after and during the service, and to help coordinate all the hosts and all the things that they were trying to do. They asked if I would throw my name in the hat along with some others that were considering this position. And I really came to God and said, God, is this something you really want me to do? I've got a lot going on, and I do a lot with my own online ministry, but I'm willing to help if you want me to help. And it seems clear that you have opened a door that I wouldn't have known about or thought about except for what leapt in my heart on that day a year earlier. Well, they ended up offering me the job. I took the job, and I've worked there for the past 20 months, helping them with their online ministry, the whole while with a goal in mind of reaching 25,000 viewers. I thought that might take 5 years, 7 years. I knew that we could get to it, but I wasn't sure how and I wasn't sure when. And when we started reaching during this shelter in place, what started reaching 12,000, 15,000, 17,000 people, and I knew Easter was coming, I thought to myself, wow, we might actually reach 20,000 people, 25,000 people on Easter Sunday. And I knew if that time came that I would have reached that goal, both for the church and for me personally, that was on my heart. And I had a lot that I wanted to do with my own online ministry. And I told one of the pastors on staff, I said, if we reach that 25,000, I think I'm going to need to go back to my own ministry because you'll have enough people at that point taking care of your ministry. And I'm going to go back and continue riding this great wave of online ministry myself. Well, I prayed with our people in the chat room. I'm just going to share this picture with you in closing. I prayed that morning of Easter Sunday, and I held up a number for them on the screen, and it's backwards here in my screen, but I told them that I would love to get to 20,000. I thought from 17,000 the week before, if we could get to 20,000 for the week, that would be amazing. And but we could probably do that just because it was Easter Sunday. But I said if we could reach 22,266 people, that would be my personal goal for the day, partly because that's how many people I was reaching in my own ministry. And I knew if the church could reach that goal, then I had taken them as far as I could take them because that's how far I had taken my own ministry. And I said the supernatural, the miraculous goal would be if we could reach 25,000 people. And that morning, we reached 20,000 people just during the morning services alone. By 2:20 in the afternoon, we had reached the goal of 22,266 people. And as the week went on, those numbers kept rising, 22,000, 23,000, 24,000. And by Saturday night, we end at midnight counting. Saturday night at 10 p.m., with 2 hours to go, we reached 25,000 people. And by midnight, we had reached 25,066 people. It was just a remarkable goal to me. It was a supernatural goal, and it was a supernatural answer to prayer. Now, for me, it was very important, very significant. For the church, it was very important and very significant. But for God and for the people we reached, it was extremely important and significant because God had said what he wanted to do. He had called me into the fray to get involved with that and to help out. And through many hands, it made light work, and we were able to reach that goal. Now, our numbers since then have gone back more in the 13,000, 14,000 range, which was still a fairly healthy and double what we were reaching prior to this. both in person and online, we were reaching about 7,000 total, and now we're reaching 13 to 14,000 per week, which is remarkable. And I think we'll be right back up at 25,000 and beyond as the weeks and months go on, because the internet is just that capable of reaching so many people, and because God cares so much. He doesn't want one person to perish, but he wants everyone to come to eternal life. I'll just close with this. If you haven't put your faith in Christ, trust him today. He is worth putting your trust in. For those of you who have, which is many of you watching this, I pray this is a great reminder to you that numbers matter because people matter. And I hope that as you count, that you count what God counts and you care about what God cares about. And that is people and their hearts and their eternal salvation. Oh, and I forgot, there's one more thing, as Steve Jobs always used to say in his speeches. Why did the Star Wars movies come out in the sequence 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3? Why? Because in charge of the sequence Yoda was. With that, have a great day.